In today's story, we're diving deep into a tale of love, betrayal, and family secrets that will leave you speechless. Imagine discovering that your wife, the person you vowed to spend your life with, is not only unfaithful but is having an affair with your own brother. It's a heart-wrenching and shocking journey of uncovering lies, facing the ultimate betrayal, and finding the strength to move forward. Join us as we unravel the emotional turmoil and the painful reality of, I can't believe my cheating wife is having an affair with my brother. Ben sat at the wooden table in the Cozy Corner, a quaint little café tucked away in the heart of Boston. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of jazz music filled the air, creating a cozy atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his heart. It was a place he and his best friend, Steve, often frequented, but today's meeting carried a weight unlike any other. Ben's mind was a whirlwind of emotions as he sipped his coffee, his thoughts lingering on the past few weeks. He had always prided himself on his meticulous nature. From the moment he decided to marry Kate, he had checked every detail, ensuring they were ready for this lifelong commitment. But despite his careful planning, he found himself blindsided by betrayal. It all started with a nagging feeling. Something was off. Kate, his wife of 6 years, had been acting strangely. Her laughter no longer reached her eyes, and her smiles felt forced. The distance between them had grown, and Ben couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Steve arrived, shaking Ben from his thoughts. Steve, his best friend since 7th grade, had been a constant presence in his life. They had shared countless memories, from high school pranks to college dreams, and now, this moment of despair. Hey, Ben, Steve greeted, pulling out a chair and sitting down. You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's Kate. I think she's cheating on me. Steve's eyes widened in surprise. Kate? Are you sure? I don't have concrete evidence, but I can't shake this feeling. She's been distant, secretive. I don't know what to do, Steve. Steve leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Tell me everything, from the beginning. Ben took a deep breath and began to recount the events that had led him to this point. He spoke of the late nights Kate spent out, claiming to be with friends or at book club meetings. He mentioned the hushed phone calls and the sudden changes in her schedule. I feel like I'm losing my mind, Ben confessed. I need to know the truth, but I don't know how to find it. Steve listened intently, his brows furrowed in concentration. When Ben finished, Steve took a moment before speaking. Ben, I think you need to confront her. But before you do, gather some evidence. You deserve to know the truth. Ben nodded, appreciating Steve's calm and rational approach. You're right. I'll figure something out. They spent the next hour discussing possible ways to uncover the truth. Steve suggested hiring a private investigator, but Ben hesitated, unsure if he wanted to take such a drastic step. Instead, they decided on a simpler approach. Ben would start paying closer attention to Kate's activities, noting any inconsistencies. As they parted ways, Ben felt a sense of determination. He would get to the bottom of this, one way or another. That evening, Ben returned home to find Kate preparing dinner in the kitchen. The smell of roasted chicken and vegetables filled the air, but it did little to calm his nerves. He approached her, forcing a smile. Hey, hun, he greeted, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She turned slightly, allowing the kiss to land awkwardly. Hi, Ben, she replied, her tone neutral. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Ben nodded, his mind racing. He needed to start paying attention, to find the cracks in her story. Over the next few days, he made a conscious effort to observe her more closely. He noted the times she left the house and the duration of her absences. He checked her phone logs when she wasn't looking, finding a few numbers he didn't recognize. One evening, as Kate claimed to be heading to her book club, Ben decided to follow her. He waited until she left the house, then quickly grabbed his keys and slipped out the door. He kept a safe distance, ensuring she wouldn't notice him. As she drove through the city, Ben's heart pounded in his chest. Finally, Kate's car pulled into the parking lot of a small, dimly lit bar. Ben parked a few spots away and watched as she entered. He waited for a few minutes before deciding to follow her inside. The bar was crowded, filled with people laughing and chatting. Ben scanned the room, his eyes landing on Kate at a corner table. She was sitting with a man he didn't recognize, their heads close together as they spoke in hushed tones. Anger and betrayal surged through Ben as he watched them. He couldn't hear their conversation, but the intimate way they leaned toward each other told him everything he needed to know. He snapped a few photos with his phone, feeling a mix of satisfaction and heartbreak. Unable to watch any longer, Ben left the bar and drove home, his mind racing with thoughts of what he had seen. When Kate returned later that night, he pretended to be asleep, his heart heavy with the weight of her betrayal. The following day, Ben met Steve at the cozy corner, again, showing him the photos he had taken. Steve's face grew grim as he looked at them. "Ben, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice filled with sympathy. "What are you going to do?" Ben shook his head, feeling lost. "I don't know. I need to confront her, but I'm not sure how." Steve placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you." That evening, Ben decided it was time to confront Kate. He waited until they were both seated at the dinner table, the silence between them thick with tension. "Kate," he began, his voice steady but firm. "I know." Kate looked up from her plate, confusion and worry etched across her face. "Know what?" "I know you're seeing someone else," Ben said, his eyes locked onto hers. "I followed you last night. I saw you with him." Kate's face paled, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked away, her hands trembling. "How long has this been going on?" Ben demanded, his anger barely contained. Kate took a deep breath, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ben, I can explain." "Just tell me the truth," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "How long?" Kate hesitated, then finally spoke. "It's been a few months. But it's not what you think. He's just a friend." "A friend?" Ben's laugh was bitter. "Do you think I'm stupid, Kate? I saw the way you were with him." Tears streamed down Kate's face as she struggled to find the right words. "Ben, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened." Ben's heart ached at her words, but he knew he couldn't let her betrayal go unaddressed. "I can't do this anymore, Kate. I want a divorce." Kate's sobs grew louder, but Ben's resolve was firm. He stood up from the table, his mind made up. He would no longer allow himself to be a victim of her lies. In the days that followed, Ben began the process of moving on. He met with a lawyer to discuss the divorce and change the locks on the house. He packed up Kate's belongings and had them sent to a friend's place, ensuring she had no reason to return. Steve continued to be a source of support, meeting Ben at the cozy corner regularly to check in on him. Their conversations ranged from the practicalities of the divorce to memories of better times, reminding Ben that he wasn't alone in this. As the weeks turned into months, Ben slowly began to rebuild his life. The pain of Kate's betrayal still lingered, but he refused to let it define him. He threw himself into his work and started to reconnect with old friends, finding solace in their company. One evening, as he sat at the cozy corner with Steve, Ben felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. "You know," he said, sipping his coffee, "I think I'm going to be okay." Steve smiled, raising his cup in a toast to new beginnings. And with that, Ben took a step forward, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Ben's life had taken a drastic turn since the revelation of Kate's infidelity. Despite the support from Steve and the progress he had made, the pain and confusion still lingered. He couldn't help but replay the events in his mind, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart. One evening, as Ben was sorting through some paperwork in his home office, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Steve, asking if he wanted to grab a drink at the cozy corner. Ben agreed, grateful for the distraction. As Ben entered the café, the familiar scent of coffee and the warm ambiance offered a small comfort. He spotted Steve sitting at their usual table, already nursing a drink. "Hey, Ben," Steve greeted him, gesturing to the seat across from him. "How are you holding up?" Ben shrugged, taking a seat and ordering a coffee. "I'm managing, I guess. It's just hard to shake off everything that's happened." Steve nodded sympathetically. "I understand. But you know, sometimes you need to hear the hard truth to move forward. Ben looked at Steve, curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Steve took a deep breath, as if bracing himself for what he was about to say. Ben, there's something I need to tell you. Something that I didn't mention before. Ben's heart rate quickened, a mix of anxiety and anticipation washing over him. What is it, Steve? Steve leaned in, lowering his voice. Kate's been seeing someone else for a lot longer than just a few months. In fact, she's been cheating on you since before you two even got married. Ben's world seemed to stop. He stared at Steve, unable to process the information. What are you talking about? Steve sighed, rubbing his temples. I didn't want to believe it myself. But it's true. I found out about it a few weeks ago, and I've been trying to find the right time to tell you. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Ben's voice was a mix of anger and hurt. I didn't know how, Ben. I was trying to figure out the best way to break it to you without causing more pain. Ben felt a wave of betrayal wash over him. Not only had Kate deceived him, but now he learned that his best friend had been keeping this from him. Who is it? Ben demanded. Steve hesitated, then finally spoke. It's Greg, your brother. The revelation hit Ben like a freight train. His own brother had been part of this betrayal. He felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and profound sadness. No, Ben said, shaking his head. That can't be true. I'm afraid it is, Ben, Steve said gently. I've seen them together. It's not just some fling. It's been going on for years. Ben's mind raced. He thought back to all the times Kate had claimed to be with her friends or at book club meetings. It all made sense now. The puzzle pieces fell into place, and the picture they formed was devastating. I need to confront him, Ben said, his voice trembling with emotion. Steve nodded. Do what you need to do, Ben. But just know that I'm here for you, no matter what. That night, Ben couldn't sleep. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He replayed every interaction he had with Greg and Kate, looking for signs he might have missed. How could he have been so blind? The next morning, Ben decided he couldn't wait any longer. He needed to confront Greg and get the truth. He drove to Greg's house, his heart pounding in his chest. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw Greg's car parked outside. Taking a deep breath, Ben walked up to the front door and knocked. Greg answered the door, a look of surprise on his face. Ben, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Ben said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Greg stepped aside, letting Ben in. They moved to the living room, the tension between them palpable. What's this about? Greg asked, trying to sound casual but failing to hide the nervous edge in his voice. I know about you and Kate, Ben said bluntly. Steve told me everything. Greg's face paled, and he looked away, unable to meet Ben's eyes. I can explain. Explain what? Ben's voice rose. Explain how you could betray me like this. How you could sleep with my wife behind my back for years. Greg took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. It started before you two got married. We never meant for it to go this far. That doesn't make it any better, Ben snapped. You had countless opportunities to stop, to come clean. But you didn't. Greg's shoulders slumped, and he finally met Ben's gaze. I know. And I'm sorry, Ben. I truly am. I never wanted to hurt you. Ben felt a mix of anger and sadness. You've destroyed everything, Greg. My marriage, my trust in you. How can you ever make this right? Greg looked down, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can. But I want to try. I want to make amends, if you'll let me. Ben shook his head, feeling the weight of the betrayal. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this. But right now, I need to focus on getting through this. Greg nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I understand. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. Ben stood up, the conversation leaving him emotionally drained. I need some time to process all of this. I'll be in touch. As Ben left Greg's house, he felt a sense of closure, but also a deep wound that would take time to heal. He drove back home, his mind replaying the conversation. The truth was out, but the path to healing was just beginning. In the following days, Ben focused on the divorce proceedings, determined to move on from the pain. He changed the locks on the house and packed up the last of Kate's belongings, ensuring there were no reminders of her betrayal left. Steve remained a constant support, helping Ben navigate the emotional aftermath. They met regularly at the cozy corner, where Ben found solace in their conversations and the familiar surroundings. One evening, as they sat at their usual table, Steve looked at Ben with concern. "How are you holding up?" Ben shrugged, sipping his coffee. "It's hard, but I'm getting there. Confronting Greg was tough, but it was something I needed to do." Steve nodded. "You're strong, Ben. You'll get through this." Ben managed a small smile. "Thanks, Steve. I don't know what I'd do without you." As the days turned into weeks, Ben continued to rebuild his life. He threw himself into his work and reconnected with old friends, slowly finding his way back to a sense of normalcy. But the betrayal he had experienced left a lasting mark. It would take time for the wounds to heal and for trust to be rebuilt. For now, Ben focused on taking things one day at a time, knowing that he had the support of his friends and the strength within himself to overcome this difficult chapter in his life. After confronting his brother Greg and coming to terms with the depth of the betrayal, Ben knew he couldn't delay the inevitable confrontation with Kate any longer. The tension had been building for days, and it was time to face the woman who had shattered his trust and heart. That evening, as Ben sat in his living room, the house felt unusually quiet. The silence was almost suffocating, a stark contrast to the chaos in his mind. He heard the familiar sound of Kate's car pulling into the driveway. His heart pounded in his chest as he prepared himself for the confrontation. Kate entered the house, her footsteps echoing through the hallway. She called out to Ben, her voice carrying an air of casualness that now seemed almost cruel. "Ben, I'm home." Ben stood up from the couch, his hands clenched at his sides. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. Kate paused, sensing the seriousness in his tone. She walked into the living room, her eyes meeting his. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. Ben took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I know about you and Greg," he said, his voice breaking the silence like a hammer shattering glass. Kate's face went pale, and she took a step back, her eyes wide with shock. "What? Ben? Don't lie to me, Kate," Ben interrupted, his voice rising. "I've talked to Steve. I've talked to Greg. I know everything." Tears welled up in Kate's eyes, and she looked away, unable to meet Ben's gaze. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." Ben felt a surge of anger and pain. "But you did, Kate. You hurt me in the worst possible way. How could you do this to me? To us?" Kate's shoulders shook with silent sobs. "It just happened. I didn't plan for any of this. It started before we got married, and I didn't know how to stop." Ben's heart ached at her words, but he couldn't let himself be swayed by her tears. "You had so many chances to tell me the truth, to stop what you were doing. But you didn't. You lied to me for years." Kate wiped at her tears, trying to compose herself. "I was scared, Ben. I didn't want to lose you." "You lost me the moment you decided to betray me," Ben said, his voice cold. "This marriage is over, Kate. I want a divorce." Kate's sobs grew louder, and she sank to the floor, her hands covering her face. "Please, Ben, don't do this. We can fix this. I love you." Ben shook his head, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. "You made your choice, Kate. Now I'm making mine. I can't stay in a marriage built on lies." Kate looked up at him, her eyes filled with desperation. "What about everything we've been through? What about our dreams, our plans?" Ben's voice softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "Our dreams and plans mean nothing if they're built on deceit. I'm sorry, Kate, but this is the end." The next morning, Ben called his lawyer and instructed him to proceed with the divorce. He felt a sense of relief, knowing he had taken the first step toward reclaiming his life. But the pain of the betrayal still weighed heavily on him. As the days passed, Ben focused on finalizing the divorce and moving forward. He changed the locks on the house and packed up the last of Kate's belongings, ensuring there were no reminders of her betrayal left. Steve continued to be a source of support, meeting Ben at the cozy corner regularly to check in on him. Their conversations ranged from the practicalities of the divorce to memories of better times, reminding Ben that he wasn't alone in this. One evening, as they sat at their usual table, Steve looked at Ben with concern. "How are you holding up?" Ben shrugged, sipping his coffee. "It's hard, but I'm getting there." Confronting Kate was tough, but it was something I needed to do. Steve nodded. "You're strong, Ben. You'll get through this." Ben managed a small smile. "Thanks, Steve. I don't know what I'd do without you." In the following weeks, Ben tried to establish a new routine. He threw himself into his work and began reconnecting with old friends. Each day was a struggle, but he found solace in the small steps he was taking towards healing. One afternoon, Ben received an unexpected call from Kate. His heart raced as he debated whether to answer, but he knew he needed closure. He picked up the phone, his voice steady. "Hello? Ben, it's Kate." Her voice was soft, filled with a mix of regret and hope. "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but can we meet? Just one last time?" Ben hesitated, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. "What do you want, Kate?" "I just want to talk. Please, Ben. Give me one chance to explain everything." Ben sighed, feeling the weight of the decision. "Okay, one last time. Meet me at the Cozy Corner tomorrow at 4 p.m. The next day, Ben arrived at the Cozy Corner a few minutes early. The familiar surroundings provided a sense of comfort as he prepared for the final conversation with Kate. He didn't have to wait long before she walked in, looking nervous and unsure. Kate approached the table and sat down, her eyes avoiding his. "Thank you for meeting me, Ben." Ben nodded, his expression neutral. "What do you want to say, Kate?" Kate took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I know I've hurt you in ways that can never be undone. I can't change the past, but I want you to know the truth. Greg and it was a mistake. A terrible, ongoing mistake. But it was never about you. It was about my own fears and insecurities." Ben listened, his emotions in turmoil. "You should have told me the truth from the beginning. We could have worked through it together." "I know," Kate whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was a coward. I took the easy way out, and in doing so, I destroyed everything we had." Ben felt a pang of sadness but knew he couldn't let her words sway him. "It's too late, Kate. The trust is gone, and without it, we have nothing." Kate nodded, her sobs quieting. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I truly am sorry. And I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Ben looked at her, feeling a mix of sadness and finality. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Kate. But I do hope you find peace and happiness. Goodbye." Kate stood up, her eyes filled with regret. "Goodbye, Ben." As she walked out of the café, Ben felt a sense of closure. The chapter with Kate was finally over, and while the wounds were still fresh, he knew he could begin to heal. In the weeks that followed, Ben continued to rebuild his life. He focused on his work, spent time with friends, and allowed himself to grieve the loss of his marriage. The support from Steve and his other friends was invaluable, helping him navigate the difficult journey ahead. One evening, as Ben sat at the Cozy Corner with Steve, he felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. "You know," he said, sipping his coffee, "I think I'm going to be okay." Steve smiled, raising his cup in a toast to new beginnings. And with that, Ben took a step forward, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The divorce process moved faster than Ben had anticipated. With Kate out of the house and all her belongings packed away, he could finally focus on himself and the future he wanted to build. The emotional turmoil was still there, but each day, he found new ways to cope and move forward. Ben sat in his lawyer's office, discussing the final details of the divorce settlement. His lawyer, Mr. Harris, was a calm and collected man with years of experience handling difficult cases. "Ben, I have to say, you've handled this situation with remarkable composure," Mr. Harris remarked, glancing over the paperwork. Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It hasn't been easy, but I know it's the right thing to do. I just want to move on." Mr. Harris nodded. "I understand. We're almost done here. Just a few more signatures, and you'll be officially divorced." Ben picked up the pen and signed the last of the documents, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. This chapter of his life was coming to an end, and a new one was about to begin. The next step was changing the locks on the house and making sure Kate had no reason to come back. Ben hired a locksmith to install new locks and security systems. As he watched the locksmith work, he felt a sense of control returning to his life. Once the locks were changed, Ben turned his attention to his home. He wanted to create a space that was entirely his own, free from the memories of his failed marriage. He began with the living room, redecorating it with new furniture and artwork. It was a therapeutic process, helping him reclaim his environment and make it a place of comfort and peace. Steve remained a constant support, meeting Ben at the cozy corner regularly to check in on him. Their conversations ranged from the practicalities of the divorce to memories of better times, reminding Ben that he wasn't alone in this. One evening, as they sat at their usual table, Steve looked at Ben with concern. "How are you holding up?" Ben shrugged, sipping his coffee. "It's hard, but I'm getting there. Confronting Kate was tough, but it was something I needed to do." Steve nodded. "You're strong, Ben. You'll get through this." Ben managed a small smile. "Thanks, Steve. I don't know what I'd do without you." In the following weeks, Ben tried to establish a new routine. He threw himself into his work and began reconnecting with old friends. Each day was a struggle, but he found solace in the small steps he was taking towards healing. One afternoon, Ben received an unexpected call from Kate. His heart raced as he debated whether to answer, but he knew he needed closure. He picked up the phone, his voice steady. "Hello? Ben, it's Kate." Her voice was soft, filled with a mix of regret and hope. "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but can we meet? Just one last time?" Ben hesitated, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. "What do you want, Kate?" "I just want to talk. Please, Ben. Give me one chance to explain everything." Ben sighed, feeling the weight of the decision. "Okay, one last time. Meet me at the cozy corner tomorrow at 4 p.m. The next day, Ben arrived at the cozy corner a few minutes early. The familiar surroundings provided a sense of comfort as he prepared for the final conversation with Kate. He didn't have to wait long before she walked in, looking nervous and unsure. Kate approached the table and sat down, her eyes avoiding his. "Thank you for meeting me, Ben." Ben nodded, his expression neutral. "What do you want to say, Kate?" Kate took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I know I've hurt you in ways that can never be undone. I can't change the past, but I want you to know the truth. Greg and it was a mistake. A terrible, ongoing mistake. But it was never about you. It was about my own fears and insecurities." Ben listened, his emotions in turmoil. "You should have told me the truth from the beginning. We could have worked through it together." "I know," Kate whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was a coward. I took the easy way out, and in doing so, I destroyed everything we had." Ben felt a pang of sadness but knew he couldn't let her words sway him. "It's too late, Kate. The trust is gone, and without it, we have nothing." Kate nodded, her sobs quieting. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I truly am sorry. And I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Ben looked at her, feeling a mix of sadness and finality. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Kate. But I do hope you find peace and happiness. Goodbye." Kate stood up, her eyes filled with regret. "Goodbye, Ben." As she walked out of the café, Ben felt a sense of closure. The chapter with Kate was finally over, and while the wounds were still fresh, he knew he could begin to heal. In the weeks that followed, Ben continued to rebuild his life. He focused on his work, spent time with friends, and allowed himself to grieve the loss of his marriage. The support from Steve and his other friends was invaluable, helping him navigate the difficult journey ahead. One evening, as Ben sat at the cozy corner with Steve, he felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. "You know," he said, sipping his coffee, "I think I'm going to be okay." Steve smiled, raising his cup in a toast to new beginnings. And with that, Ben took a step forward, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Ben's efforts to rebuild his life continued as he began to explore new interests and reconnect with old friends. He joined a local gym, taking up yoga and meditation to help center his mind and body. He also rekindled his passion for photography, spending weekends capturing the beauty of Boston through his lens. One Saturday, as he was photographing the city's historic sites, he met a woman named Grace. She was a fellow photographer, and they struck up a conversation about their favorite spots in the city. There was an instant connection, and they exchanged numbers, agreeing to meet up for a photography session the following weekend. As Ben got to know Grace, he found himself opening up to her in ways he hadn't with anyone else since his divorce. Grace was kind, understanding, and had a calming presence that put Ben at ease. Their friendship grew, and over time, so did their feelings for each other. One evening, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the Charles River, Grace turned to Ben, her eyes filled with warmth. "Ben, I know you've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I care about you deeply." Ben smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you, Grace. You've been a light in my life during a very dark time." They continued to see each other, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Ben found himself laughing more, enjoying life in a way he hadn't since before the betrayal. Grace's presence was a healing balm to his wounded heart. As the months went by, Ben and Grace's relationship deepened. They supported each other through life's ups and downs, building a strong foundation of trust and love. Ben's past still lingered, but it no longer defined him. He had found a new path, one that was filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future. One evening, as they sat together at the cozy corner, Ben took Grace's hand in his. "Grace, I know we've only been together for a short time, but I feel like I've known you forever. You've helped me heal and shown me what true love can be." Grace smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "Ben, I feel the same way. I believe we've both found something special in each other." Ben took a deep breath, his heart pounding with anticipation. "Grace, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Grace's eyes filled with tears of joy, and she nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Ben, I will." They embraced, surrounded by the familiar warmth of the cozy corner, knowing that they were embarking on a new journey together. Ben's journey from betrayal and heartache to love and happiness was a testament to his resilience and strength. He had faced the darkest moments of his life and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future with open arms. As he stood with Grace on their wedding day, surrounded by friends and family, Ben felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had learned that even in the face of the deepest pain, there was always hope. And with that hope, he had found a new beginning, a new love, and a new life filled with endless possibilities. As we come to the end of this heart-wrenching story, we're reminded of the incredible strength and resilience that people can find within themselves, even in the face of the deepest betrayals. Ben's journey from devastation to healing shows us that while the pain of betrayal can be overwhelming, it doesn't define our entire lives. By confronting the truth, seeking support, and opening up to new beginnings, Ben was able to rebuild his life and find happiness once more. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. Until next time, take care and stay strong.